Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the channel. I'm Mack Justin, real estate attorney, broker, investor, and the guy behind this thing blog, where property meets real talk. Today, I want to go through my first three posts that I dropped. One for tenant, one for landlord, and one for investors. Um, because when I say I cover all side of real estate, I mean it. So the first one that I want to go over is first block that I'm going to go is the tenant application guide, which is located in the broker's desk. So let's go there. This blog, this article basically breaks down what landlords like me and most of Florida is actually looking for when we're screening a tenant, when we're bringing somebody into our property. So this breaks down income requirement, credit score, eviction history, and why you should talk to the landlord before you pay $100 for the application fee. So let's go over this really quickly. Um, First and foremost, always visit the property. You want to see the property because sometimes images or altered. You don't know what the place looks like. You want to know what the neighborhood looks like. You want to know what it looks like at night. You want to know what it looks like in the daytime. You just want to know the actual physical property. You don't want to rely on the Zillow image. Okay. So what are we looking for? So what's the landlord actually looking for? So for me, I normally do 2.5 times the rent. So if the rent is $1,000, I'm making sure your income every single month is $2,500. I'm asking for 1 month of security deposit. I am asking for a credit score of 600 or higher. No landlord or eviction uh, in the last 3 years. Uh, if the credit score is under 600, I can still approve you, but of course, I would have to get the owner's approval. But I would need also a double security deposit. A lot of landlords in Florida are a little bit stricter than I am. So some will ask you for 3 times the rent. So again, if the rent is $1,000, they're making sure that your income every single month is $3,000. They're also asking for first, last, and security deposit up front. So if you don't have that kind of cash, you may be out of luck. And of course, they're going to verify employment and clean rental history. So, especially if you don't meet the above criteria, definitely talk to the landlord to save you that $100 application fee because that application fee is not refundable. So if you're not approved, you're not going to get that back. If you are approved, you don't get that back. So regardless, you are out of pocket if you fill out an application and you don't talk to the landlord. So what I would recommend is I would recommend you communicate with the landlord. You call the landlord up and you said, hey, my credit is less than 600 to 600. My income is less than three times the rent. Things like that, and see what they're willing to work out. And most landlords are flexible; they can work with you, but you got to be upfront and you got to give them that option to try to work with you. Okay. Um, some tips here, 100% honest, they're going to find out in the background check. So don't say no criminal, no landlord collection. They're going to know. Okay. Have your ID ready and pay stub ready. Um, if you see a property that you like, move on it fast because rental go pretty fast. Review your lease and very important, review chapter 83, which we're going to go over next. Okay. So Next up is basically the rules that govern the landlord and tenant. Okay, so we can find that in the legal lab. So we go to legal lab. Mhm. So Florida Statute 83 governs the residential, well, 83 Part 2 govern the residential rental agreement. So this is everything landlord and tenant needs to know about moving in, lease violation, eviction notice, security deposits, and so forth. So first and foremost, you moving in, document everything. We need photos. You need photos. The landlord needs photos. Because when you move out, the place kind of have to look exactly like I gave it to you. But it's not even that. Is when you move out, you don't want the landlord to say, "Hey, you know what? This wasn't there," and charge you for it, or vice versa. So you don't want a miscommunication or claim on your security deposit. So the best thing you do when you move in, you document everything, and you let the landlord know, hey, this is what's going on. This is what the property looks like. So who then knows what when it comes to maintenance? When it comes to maintenance, big ticket items are normally the landlord's responsibility, such as, roof, foundation, plumbing, etc. Um, Tenants are responsible, to keep the property in a um, clean place. Okay. You're supposed to not have damage to the property. You're supposed to report issues to the landlord. So let's go back to one of those big ticket items. Let's say, for example, electrical or heatings are not working, but you failed to notify the landlord. You're probably going to be responsible for maybe the cost or repair if for some reason you didn't report it and 6 months down the line, it doesn't work. The landlord can probably go after you for that. So make sure you are notifying the landlord of any issues that are, in the property. But things like, pests like roaches normally falls on the tenant. But things like rodent, like rat living in the attic type of thing, that's, really a landlord type of issue. Again, but if your lease doesn't say it, it's mostly the landlord's responsibility. Um, Try to make sure it's very clear before you move in whose responsibility is for what. You miss a payment. What happens? You miss a payment as a tenant, the landlord have to give you a 3-day notice. Okay? The landlord must give you a 3-day notice before even filing for eviction. They're not allowed to lock you out. They're not allowed to cut their utility. They're not allowed to remove front doors. Removing front doors is the craziest thing ever. But it has happened. Okay, this has happened to some people. So, but this constitute illegal eviction, and of course, the tenant can sue for damages if the landlord does this. So, 3 days pass, you pay your rent, nothing happens. But if you don't pay your rent within 3 days, the next step is the landlord can, may, and will file an eviction. So here's the thing about the state of Florida when it comes to an eviction. You have to do, as the tenant, you have to do two things. And this is super, super important. You have to, one, answer the complaint. And then two, pay the money that the landlord is claiming in the court registry. So it's crazy, right? So if the landlord is claiming that you owe $1 million, you got to put $1 million in the court registry to not get a default. And of course, I say that to say, of course, there's going to be some judges looking at this to make sure, the lease and everything is somewhat reasonable. But technically, if you're short $1 out of that $1 million, you can get a default. And the reason is, is for, tenants not to just say, oh, I paid the rent, or, I will pay the rent, or I have the money when they don't actually have the money. So the statute kind of like forced them to put something in the registry to say, we're not just, you're not just saving the money, or you're not just spending the money somewhere else. You actually have the money to pay the landlord, and then here's the reason why you're not paying the rent. So there's that. So again, you have to do two things when an eviction is filed on you. That is, answer the eviction. If you don't answer, that's the default. And then put the money in the court registry. If you don't put the money in the court registry, that's the default. Okay, so you can't do just one. You got to do both. Okay. So that's for missed payments for rent, 3-day notice. But everything else, we're looking at a 7-day notice. So if you fail to cut the grass, if you have an occupied tenant there, anything that you're doing that you're breaching the lease, the landlord can give you a 7-day notice to cure. And a 7-day is, hey, here's a 7-day, you got to cure this. And within 7 days, if you don't cure it, then they can give you, a termination notice. One thing that I didn't include in here, which is also good to mention, is that if the same thing happened twice within 1 year, automatic termination. So I know this is hard. If you fail to mow the lawn twice and they have to give you 2 notice within 1 year, statute says that I can basically terminate your lease and just call it a day. Okay? Here's something most people are not aware of, most tenants are not aware of, and I'm pretty sure most landlords are aware of this. So, tenants, you can also give the landlord a 7-day notice to cure if there is some repair they're not doing. So let's take example, mold, for example. So mold is a big ticket item here in Florida. We know how mold happens. Mold is bad. So you have mold in your living room. You tell the landlord, hey, you need to come and fix this. They don't fix it. You don't keep talking about it. You don't keep doing that back and forth with the landlord. And I know there's some landlord here out here listening. So yes, landlord. So as a tenant, don't keep doing the back and forth with the landlord. Give them a 7-day notice to cure. Okay, 7-day notice to cure the mold. And it says 7 days or within a reasonable time thereafter. So if there's mold, it's probably going to take more than 7 days to take out all the mold, to clean it, because you're going to have to like bring a machine in, remediate the mold and all that other stuff. So sometimes it could take like, 15 to 20 days to get mold completely, depending how big, how massive you have of a mold in your area. So there's that. So 7 days or within a reasonable reasonable time. Sorry. So if you give them the 7 days notice and it's a reasonable time and they're working with a vendor to try to get it done, that's fair. That's good. But after the 7 days, they don't do anything, you can withhold the rent. Withhold the rent. And now the landlord have no choice but to do it because now you're not paying rent. So if the landlord sue for non-payments of rent, then you just say, hey, judge, I gave the guy a 7-day notice and he didn't fix it. But of course, remember, you have to do 2 things. You have to put the money in the court registry also. Okay? Because the landlord needs that protection too. Holdover and non-renewal. If your lease expires July 31st, you got to be out July 31st or before. You stay there on August 1st. I have the right to seek double rent from you. So if your rent is $1,000 every single month. August 1st, you owe me $2,000. Okay. Of course, this goes back to communication with the landlord. Um, because if you communicate with the landlord and you say, hey, I'm having a difficulty, trying to move out, this is what's going on, they'll probably kind of like try to work with you. But if you don't communicate with anybody, chances are, they have the right to try to go after them for rent. Non-renewal notice, basically just saying, I don't want to renew your lease. So, sometimes people think that, even if they lived in the property for 17 years, they think that they have an option or they have a right to stay in the property. There is no right as a tenant in the state of Florida. Even if you've been there for 30 years, there's no right. The landlord can wake up and decide that they don't like your hair color, which is not a protected right. Okay. So protected rights or rights that are under fair housing, we're talking about race, gender, and all that other stuff. They can decide, hey, I don't want to renew your lease anymore. So there is no, right to, even if you've been there for 40 years, that, that the landlord have to renew your lease. You can always go on a month to month. They can always give you notice to just vacate. Move out. When you move out, the landlord has 30 days to put a claim on your security deposit to say, hey, that hole was not there. I'm going to hire a vendor to fix it. I'm taking out of your security deposit. You have 30 days to send you a form, the tenant, your tenant. The landlord has 30 days to send the tenant a form, which is a claim on security deposit form, to say, hey, I'm taking money out of your security deposit, or I'm taking your entire security deposit. Even worse, I'm taking your entire security deposit and you still owe me some more money, because I still have to fix this and your security deposit wasn't enough to cover the entire thing. Okay. Final takeaway from this is communication and documentation. Like, that equals protection. If you communicate and you document everything, and that's for both sides, that's for landlord, that's for tenant. When I have to go to court, it just makes my job so much easier, rather than me doing that he say she say type of thing. He say she say type of thing is, it's not really good in court, because I can tell you, the judge has to figure out who has the better story. Okay, I represent either the landlord or the tenant, so I believe whoever I represent, and I give the benefit of the doubt to whoever I represent. But the judge is in the middle and has to figure out whose story sounds a little bit better, which is so wrong, but that's what we have. And I think it's, one of the best systems that we have. There's nothing else. I don't think there's any other way we could do this, but you need somebody on the outside if you have the he said, she said. So avoid the he said, she said by communication, documentation. And even if you talk on the phone with someone, landlord or tenant, you can hang up the phone, send a nice little email, and say, per our conversation, blah, blah, blah. That's documentation. If someone doesn't really reply back and object to it, I'm not saying it's back, but it's something. It's better than nothing. Okay. Finally, for all my lovely investors out there, we're going to dive into the investors corner, and renting and leasing. So investors, this article here kind of cover picking the right property, setting the leasing criteria, using a real lease, not just a free downloaded version. Um, there might be things in that you're missing, so you need some stuff in there. handling eviction and notice the right legal way, and of course, protecting yourself in the security deposit. So let's go over this maybe briefly. You're an investor, you buy a property. We've heard of location, 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 location. It's big when it comes to like, investing. You want to know the area. You want to know who's living in there. One of my best location for investment is always near like a big school, like a university. I love university housing. Um, because let's take, for example, USF, University of South Florida. In the next 10 to 20 years, will the University of South Florida, go Bulls, by the way, will USF still be there? Yeah, well, will their students, mom, pops, dad, people living around there or visiting, or comedy shows or things happening in that area? Probably all the time. So if you're reasonable, and by reasonable I mean like your price, your rent price, you're always going to have income. Okay. But of course, not just that too. You also have to look at the property, the age, the roof. You don't want to move somebody in there. And we'll talk about commercial property in another setting. But residential, you don't want to move someone in there, and then you gotta replace the AC. That's pretty much more than like the month's rent. So you get a rent for like $1,200, you got to replace the AC for like $2,000. That math is not mathing. Okay. So you got to make sure you do your inspection, make sure everything is good before you try to move someone in there. Um, Clearing your tenant again goes back to your criteria. Having a set criteria save you time, money, and possibly a lawsuit. If you don't have a set criteria, people can try to come after you, sue you, because they're saying, hey, you know what? You're breaking fair housing law. You're doing this, you're doing that, because you're just nitpicking. You're just saying, hey, I want that guy, or I don't like that guy. No, if you have a set criteria, you have something on paper, and you let everybody know that's what you're going by. You never have to worry about discrimination lawsuit. You never have to worry about a Fair Housing Act. You never have to worry about that kind of thing because you're working on your criteria. Okay, using a strong lease, a lease that protects you and also that protects your tenant. Okay, again, know who handles what in the lease. Got to be very specific in the lease. The tenant's handling this, landlord's handling that. Okay. Oh, that's a big one. Respect the process. Like, I mean, don't be one of those landlords that try to lock people out, shut the power off. Especially if you're near USF. I mean, come on, come on. These guys got nightmares from exams and all other stuff. You can't be doing that. So respect the process. There's a process and everything. There is a timeline for everything. So just, you know, do it the right way. And that's the way you'll be able to, again, keep their security deposit as a landlord if, they're damaging the property. So as an investor, you want to make sure, you're protecting yourself, you're documenting everything. Um, just so when people move out, there's no he said, she said. Leasing is a business. Treat it like an actual LLC. So you have one property, you're going to treat it just like you would be running a Fortune 500 company. You got to do everything just like you would if you were running a Fortune 500 company. You got to have your tax guy. You got to have your attorney. You got to have, and I'm not saying, you have a $1,200 property, you should have like a whole team of management. No, I'm saying put things in place so you don't have to worry about things later. Okay. You can contact, an attorney and say, hey, you know what? I need a package for this building, for the next year, but of course, if you have 500 of these doors, 100% you need to have a team. You can't have 500 and not have a team. But if you have one, you don't need a team. You just need some clear guidelines, some clear procedures, some clear forms, so you can put everything together so you don't have any issues. Okay. So, whether you're a tenant, a landlord, an investor, this thing blog has something for you. I made it to teach, clarify, and protect the people who move real estate. And now, time for our sponsors. Yeah, Justin Florida Law PLLC. We handle transactions and litigation, real estate, to be specific, real estate transaction and litigation across the state of Florida. We only handle real estate. So, you need a guy to bail you out at 3 o'clock in the morning. I'm not that guy, but I know a guy. So let me know, okay? Justin, Florida Realty. We handle sales and property management, real estate and commercial across the state of Florida. And lastly, Justin, Florida Investor Summit. You bring the deal, we bring the blueprint, and we split the win. There's no class, there's no, a seminar. Well, there will be some seminars, but it will be all free. It is all free. Um, and if you click on this lovely join the Facebook group, we have a Facebook group, and it'll take you right there. And, we can talk about ways to invest in real estate, or the current deals that we're working on, and so forth. So if you found this lovely walkthrough interesting and you got some value from it, hit that like button, drop a comment, and subscribe. Hashtag the Mustang Lord. You guys be safe.